Thank you, George. Thank you. Thank you for your patience. Wow, good, very nice. And so just as quickly as possible, we'll get right into this topic. I did want to thank Eric Lee and the Kimbell board and staff for inviting me here to speak, and Regina Palm, who's taken such good care of me for months. Most of all, of course, George Shackelford, who is my co-curator and collaborator on this project, who truly is one of the great curators in America, and it has been just a fantastic opportunity and honor to work with him on this project. Finally, I wanted to thank friends that have traveled from as far away as California and Denver and Philadelphia, and even more impressive, Dallas, on a Friday night, no less. I know how nasty that drive is, so it's really great to have you all here. So George and I have been working on this project, as he said, for several years. And whenever we say to people that we're working on a Gustave Caillebotte exhibition, we inevitably get the refrain, "I love Caillebotte." But the fan often cannot name more than one or two works by the artist, if that. Indeed, two of his works are fairly well known. The Floor Scrapers, the Raboteur, which hangs at the Musée d'Orsay and has been on view in French public museums for over a century, and has been cited recently in advertisements on not one, but two floor finishing company vans. This is on the Ventura Freeway in Los Angeles. Driving 80 miles an hour, I handed my iPhone to my friend David, and he snapped this picture. And Paris Street Rainy Day, of course, otherwise known as the umbrella painting, which emerged from a private collection, actually the Caillebotte family, in 1954, and was acquired by Walter Chrysler, toured the country with some of his other paintings in the 50s, and then in 1964 was acquired by the Art Institute of Chicago, where it remains their iconic painting. It is the kind of painting that, once seen in person, imprints itself on the mind, even if the name of the maker does not. And here's an image. It's been used as a kind of iconic signal of Paris. This is at the Charles de Gaulle Airport, Terminal 2F. And then this, I usually include this slide for our friends in Washington, D.C. This is a wonderful bistro in Upper Georgetown called the Bistro Le Pic, at the back of which is this painted mural. So each of these pictures caused a sensation when they were exhibited at the second and third Impressionist exhibitions in 1876 and 77, respectively. Some critics heralded Caillebotte as the leader of the Impressionist movement. And indeed, he was at the heart of 5 of the 8 Impressionist exhibitions, organizing, helping to fund them, exhibiting dozens of paintings, some 70 of his own works, by his last showing in 1882. So why don't we know more about him? Why is his name not as familiar as that of Monet and Renoir and Degas and Pissarro? There's a number of very interesting reasons for this, involving economic issues and the art politics of Impressionism and art historiography, or the way that art history has been written, the various narratives authored by particular people with particular agendas. Caillebotte was very wealthy. His father had made quite a bit of money in textiles in the 1850s and 60s, and then he folded those proceeds into the rampant real estate development and speculation that was going on in Paris at this time. So unlike all the others in the movement, the Impressionist movement, Gustave did not need to sell his pictures, and he generally didn't sell his paintings. There was a wonderful exhibition project last year and the preceding year that was in Paris and London and Philadelphia that was about the role of Paul Duras-Ruel and the Impressionist movement. He was the dealer for the Impressionists. And it really was a wonderful research project as well. The catalog is a fantastic book. Ultimately, wasn't even able to include all the research that the team of curators produced. But it really was about his role in, he hosts the second Impressionist exhibition, then he kind of backs off. There aren't very many sales from that show. and then circles back to the movement in 1883 and mounts a series of monographic exhibitions based on his stock. And really it's Durand-Ruel that as of 1883 and into sort of 1886, there's a major show in New York, he makes the movement commercially viable. And Caillebotte, if you look at the book and you went to the exhibition, you would notice that he is largely absent. He did not participate in the commercial system of regular exhibiting and cultivating and selling to collectors, circulating his work. His work would then go into private collections and eventually often public museum collections, getting known. So that when he dies, early, young, he's 45 in 1894, his paintings mostly remained with him. He had no wife or children, he did not marry, so they were inherited by his brother, Martial. There was no market for his work in the 1890s or in the early 20th century. He had stood outside of the Durand-Ruel machine. There was a grand retrospective of his paintings in 1894, but very few of them sold. And critically, instead of summing up or coming to terms with Caillebotte's contribution to painting, as it was presented in this great exhibition in '94, art journalists tend to focus on his sensational bequest. Caillebotte was the single greatest collector of his colleagues' work, creating a stunning private collection of Impressionism, which he left to the state as early as 1876. He had put this in his will. He had been plotting to seed the French National Museum with his art, with Impressionism, in which he so believed. So he left some 70 pictures by Manet, Monet, Degas, Renoir, Cézanne, great masterpieces, which in fact the French state in 1894 wasn't quite ready to accept. They ended up accepting about 60% of it, and it still is the core to this day of the installation at the Musée d'Orsay. So it was the bequest that it was a gigantic art world drama. And Caillebotte, the Impressionist collector, much less so the painter, became his persona in early histories of the movement. And his own paintings remained in his family. In fact, the only pictures visible by Caillebotte after his death is the floor scrapers that you see on the screen and a wonderful landscape of rooftops in the snow. Both of them would have been on view at the Palais de Luxembourg from 1897 on. In the catalog, George and I had asked a young art historian named Caroline Shields to chart the public eruptions of Caillebotte's pictures across the 20th century. When they were shown, when they were acquired by a museum. And you'll see, if you turn to that section of the book, that it doesn't really pick up until a series of monographic exhibitions that Daniel Wildenstein does in the 1960s in Paris and London and New York. And then there's not a serious museum exhibition on Caillebotte's work until 1976, when the young, brilliant art historian curator Kirk Varnedoe does an exhibition that opens in Houston, Texas, at the Museum of Fine Arts, and then it goes to the Brooklyn Museum of Art. And so people start to think a little bit about this guy as a painter. In 1986, there was a major exhibition in Washington and San Francisco called The New Painting. It was a celebration of the final Impressionist exhibition and the movement and the series of exhibitions that the movement included. There were 15 paintings by Caillebotte in that show, and I think that was the moment that people really started to reckon with him. And then there was a classic 1994-95 monographic exhibition in Paris, Chicago, and Los Angeles. There are still very few paintings by Caillebotte in public collections. There are none at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Philadelphia Museum of Art has no paintings by Caillebotte. There are 2 in Boston at the Museum of Fine Arts. There are 2 at the Art Institute of Chicago, both of which we have in the show. There are 2 at the Museum of Fine Arts Houston. Neither one of them lend. They're part of the John and Audrey Beck collection. And then there are single examples of his work scattered around mostly the Midwestern United States. If you go to the Orsay and you're interested in Impressionism, you will find dozens of paintings by Monet and Renoir and Cézanne. There are only 4 there by Caillebotte, and they don't even hang all of them very often. So you have to wait for opportunities like the one upstairs to get a handle on him. So the question, who is Gustave Caillebotte? We are still trying to figure this guy out. The relative confusion and mystery surrounding Caillebotte is deepened by the inaccessibility of his work, but also by the lack of documents about his life. There are some published letters. They tend to be about his role in organizing the Impressionist exhibitions. So we have those letters. We have some basic biographical facts. There is a little biography in biographical chronology in the catalog. Michael Marinin, an author in our book, is coming out soon with a monograph on the artist, and he has done some interesting archival work on the family, really not so much on Gustave Caillebotte, the man. And then we have the painting. So what I want to do this evening is spend a little time looking at the pictures in the show with this question in mind. Who is this guy? And we have to be careful. I will confess that generally art historians are more comfortable dealing in realms of stylistic analysis or socio-political or economic context. It's always dangerous to go into biography when you're looking at pictures, but I feel it is appropriate given the personal autobiographical nature of the paintings that you see upstairs. He generally paints pictures of his immediate life, of his personal surroundings, his private friends. He doesn't do public commissions. He does not do portrait commissions. He's not traveling to record the exotic other in regions of France or England or Holland or Italy or North Africa like so many of his colleagues. He paints his family home, his own apartment that he shared with his brother, his neighborhood, his country house, his friends and family. So the question is, what can we tell about him from these pictures? The Floor Scrapers is his very first ambitious painting. It was painted for the Salon of 1875. This is the first step in making your career as a professional artist in France. You submit your picture to the Salon, and hopefully it gets accepted, and you can finally show your work to the public. So you can see by looking at this painting upstairs and here that he is clearly very well trained. He knows how to paint. He's been to the École des Beaux-Arts. He has worked with an academic master, a wonderful painter named Léon Bonnat. And this painting, this is his opportunity to get noticed, but already he is striking out in an unconventional direction. This is no anodyne portrait of the well-to-do or a big, well-organized roseate landscape of Italy or the French countryside. This is not a dramatic scene from the Bible or classical mythology. These are the things that a young professional painter seeking to curry favor from potential collectors and critics would make. One could argue that it is a genre painting, which is to say a scene of everyday life. These tended to be highly anecdotal, generally amusing of scenes of middle class or upper class life, sometimes working class life, but particularly in that case, sentimentalized, which this painting is not. This is real, hard, rhythmic, monotonous labor. These workers are stripped to the waist, sweaty, and you see, I'm sure you've all noticed, this gigantic bottle of wine off to the right. It's such boring work, they are literally going to drink their way through the day. This is real. And the nature of their labor, given the ambition of this artistic effort, is significant. They are finishing a floor in one of the brand new apartment buildings sprouting up all over Paris during this late phase of Baron Haussmann's grand urban renewal project. They are making the new Paris. The new Paris. This is a sort of feat, a project that was initiated by Napoleon III, who was president of France, elected democratically from 1848, and then enacts a coup d'etat in late 1851, and crowns himself emperor in 1852. He had huge ambitions for the capital city, and he wanted to make it the capital of the modern world. So he appoints one of his Parisian prefects, a man named Baron Haussmann, to enact this bold feat, and he digs in aggressively. and really enacts a complete transformation on the city, bringing it out of its dark, unsanitary, medieval mode into the bright, new, modern world. In the process, blasting through old neighborhoods with broad paved boulevards lined with uniformly scaled and designed block-long buildings, linking up new plazas and parks and train stations decorated with monuments. He creates the sewer system, the arrondissement system of organizing the city, very much the dominant look of Paris as we know it today. Gustave Caillebotte was singularly fascinated by this program. No other Impressionist artist was so drawn to it, so marked by it, so identified by and with it. He was born in 1848, he's roughly a decade then younger than the other Impressionists. He grows up through Haussmannization. He grows up in the first arrondissement near Châtelet. He then moves in the late 1860s to one of the newest neighborhoods in the 8th arrondissement, where his father had built a brand new townhome. And finally, he moves to an apartment in one of the big new housing complexes right behind Charles Garnier's famous Opera House, which was the architectural cherry on the cake of Haussmann's new city. Impressionism as an art movement has been permanently linked to this event, but none of the other artists thematized it so directly and insistently. The others had really grown up elsewhere, or they were already much more mature when it began in the early to mid 1850s. So what do these pictures say about this event, and what does that tell us about Caillebotte? He exhibits these 3 paintings at the 3rd Impressionist exhibition in 1879, and he hangs them together in the central gallery. They are large, they were intended as a major statement. So you have the Pont de l'Europe, in which Caillebotte is singling out one of the strangest of the new spaces, one of the most spectacular of the new city. It's a bridge, a convergence of 6 streets which meet in a small place suspended above the largest rail yard in the city, that of the Gare Saint-Lazare. So you can see that the bridge begins over here and comes forward. There's a little place that you can't make out too clearly. And then this is just one of the spurs of the 6 that come off of that place. And then down below here is this vast expanse of railroad tracks in which trains are coming and going. It was an extraordinary feat of engineering, and it had just been completed in 1868. And Caillebotte is drawn to this site and illustrates here in this picture the startling physical aspects of this space in bright sunlight, the broad, clean street, the crisp curb of the new sidewalk, the iron crisscrossing girders which march all the way across the rail yard, the uniform buildings at the back, the puff of steam from a locomotive moving beneath the bridge. So you can see there's a little train here, and then this big sort of white cloud is steam of an engine that's just gone beneath. Then he sets in motion citizens utilizing the new space. Men, mostly workers, leaning against the railing, watching the trains come and go. And this, of course, is the most iconic modern spectacle, the steam engine. People are wandering along the sidewalk. This young worker here leans, looking to the right. And then you see that highly dressed, rather garishly so, woman at the center who's looking left. And then the top-hatted man who's just past her looking right. A dog is wandering in. He doesn't seem to have a leash or an owner, underlining the question of who belongs to who in this painting. Is anyone together, or is it just a totally random assortment of people? Caillebotte, in fact, has taken pains to separate this couple into independent players. So there's an oil sketch, for the painting, in which you see very clearly that in an original iteration he had them together as a couple walking along. But he decides very deliberately in the final picture to skew them, to separate them out. It's an image of public commingling of different types and their entropic solo trajectories. the house painters. Like the floor scrapers, these are guys who are making the new city. In this case, putting the finishing touches on the exterior of a building. Again, the strangeness of this space, that radically plunging perspective, and the isolation of each individual who's absorbed in painting or contemplation or walking, all of them alone. Most spectacularly, of course, Paris Street Rainy Day, which is an exceedingly strange space. And I challenge all of you on your next trip to Paris to search this spot out. It's just beyond the Pont de l'Europe, quite near the Gare Saint-Lazare. It was a brand new space when Caillebotte paints it, a late stage of Haussmannization. It had previously been a sort of nowhere little dusty hill with a couple of little shacks. But Haussmann rams these boulevards through. It is a little place in which 7 Haussmannian buildings come rushing to a convergence. But it's extraordinary, and so you can imagine somebody growing up knowing this site, and then within a couple of years finding that absolutely nothing remains from before, complete demolition and reconstruction. And Caillebotte is enhancing this effect of the new, spotless, perspectival effects. He emphasizes the ruler-straight recession of the buildings and street with a ruler. Into this sort of stage set, Caillebotte places an assortment of different types. Again, individual players randomly moving about this highly, arguably over-engineered environment. These human subunits fending for themselves against the elements with the individuating instrument of the black steel frame umbrella. The automatonization, one feels, moving through a city designed to control mass circulation. In this selection of this, in Caillebotte's selection of this particular site, and the way that he emphasizes its strange newness, the strict control of space by architects and engineers, the uniformity of contemporary fashion, the mass-produced umbrella, there's a critical calling out, an expression of discomfort with an ambivalence, perhaps, towards this most modern urban space. And, of course, it's on an epic scale, designed viscerally to absorb the viewer, to transport them to this notable site. It's not just a casually recorded sketch, but a painstakingly constructed, loud statement. It is, in fact, a history painting. The wonderful Kimbell Pont de l'Europe, in which the artist pulls in close to those iron girders along the Pont de l'Europe. Such a powerful painting, so poetic and enigmatic. It's really Caillebotte at his best. He has evacuated space, and he seems to take the subject of the anonymity of the street, passers-by all absorbed in different worlds, different states of motion, different states of mind as his subject. So there's a way in which Caillebotte's theme does seem to be the sensation of being alone in the modern city, both out in the street and in private interiors. And I'm showing you here 2 images of Caillebotte's family home, young man at the window and this woman at the window looking out. Both of them, sort of in interiors. This fellow is, this is a picture which we reproduced in the catalog many, many times, but doesn't sadly make it into the exhibition, but it's one of the iconic paintings by Caillebotte of his young brother René looking out on a brand new boulevard. There's a woman about to step off of a curb, and he's just sort of taking in this very solitary way, the spectacle. Or this woman, much more interior sort of sensation, looking out across a narrow street to the Hotel Canterbury on the other side. And if you look very carefully in this painting, you'll see that somebody across the way is doing the exact same thing, looking out the window. This wonderful, again, very sort of enigmatic, mysterious painting from Cleveland, this man in a kind of trance, looking out. And then one of my favorite images in the exhibition, The Man at the Cafe, in which you have a young, sort of stylish bloke standing alone in this very public space of entertainment and lively interaction, social interaction. It's a Parisian street cafe, but clearly the fun hasn't yet begun, and he feels very much alone. So Caillebotte is interested in rendering this newish sensation of anonymity and isolation as more and more people are flooding into Paris from the provinces to the capital city. Old Paris had absorbed them, immigrants into the city, into mini urban villages, communal neighborhoods. Haussmannization has broken so many of those little sort of villages up and created new structures, socially engineered to facilitate an urban life that was efficient and clean and controllable. How did associational ties function in this new environment? Did they function? Edouard Manet is considered to be the father of Impressionism, although he never actually shows with the Impressionists. He meets with them, he encourages them. They all look to him as a kind of mentor, particularly, I would argue, Caillebotte. And I think that he really is the most poignant visual poet of this sensation of modernity, as one of loneliness and what you could call anomie, which is defined in the dictionary as, quote, social instability resulting from a breakdown of standards and values, personal unrest, alienation, and uncertainty that comes from a lack of purpose or ideals. And I'm showing you here with the man at the cafe one of my favorite paintings from the National Gallery of Art by Manet. It's called The Plum, or Plum Brandy. And it's from about the same time that he's painting Man at the Cafe. And we were cleaning it. We had it in the conservation studio at the gallery as we were planning the Caillebotte exhibition. And you can see how much it has in common with what Caillebotte's doing, the marble table and the Parisian sidewalk cafe, the fashionability of these two young people. They are probably not born well-to-do, but each of them have earned some money, and so they've attired themselves in the very latest, her wonderful pink frock and that marvelous hat. And they're out on the town, because this is what you do when you come into the provinces and get a job in the city and are living, in an apartment house. You go out for some fun. But they're, it's also, I think, both of them very poetic evocations of that particular kind of loneliness when you're out in a big, loud public location. And particularly her, as she sits there, she's got before her in a little crystal glass a brandy-soaked plum, an inebriant that she hasn't started enjoying, and then she's got between her fingers a cigarette that isn't yet lit, so a kind of invitation. They seem to be waiting for some sort of proposal. And then I think, most spectacularly, the Manet's masterpiece, The Bar at the Folies Bergère from 1882, painted 2 years after Caillebotte's meditation on the theme of a cafe player standing in front of a mirror. So pay special attention in the show when you return to it on how that mirror configures and confuses and complicates your sense of the space that you're standing in and that he's standing in. And that sense of uncertainty and confusion, I think both artists are trying to make you interiorize as you look at this painting, because that's the feeling in this glittering space of surface shimmer. Thereafter, what the emotional sensation might be. Now, I would argue that Gustave Caillebotte was singularly sensitized to this sensation. Actually, that's a perfect soundtrack for what I'm about to say, that sort of mournful music. He was from a family of 4 boys, a stepbrother and 2 brothers, and the patriarch of the family dies the day after Christmas in 1874, just as young Gustave was embarking on his art career. And in 1875, Gustave paints these 3 pictures. And again, our dream had been, we have these 2 wonderful paintings in the exhibition, and I had hoped for a third. I view them almost as a kind of triptych. They are paintings of the family country estate in Hyères, which is just near Paris, which the father had bought in 1860. He's doing very well, so he buys a country estate for his family to enjoy themselves in. And I find all three of these paintings to be rather melancholic and elegiac, and I think they really are, all three of them, sort of mourning paintings for the lost patriarch. This is a wonderfully poetic, sort of sad, the boat empty on the other side. This building, which you see way in the back here in the prairie at Yare, is the casa. It's the home, it's the family home that they would inhabit out in the country. And this is possibly Caillebotte's brother Martial and cousin Zoe on one of the carefully engineered paths of this garden, looking sort of mournfully off at the casa. Or this incredible painting, and every time I look at this picture, I assume it's going to be bigger than it is, and I'm always surprised by how much the artist has packed into this small-scale, intense painting of his mother and his younger brother, René, sitting for luncheon in the family home on the Rue de Miromesnil. And then here's the place set for the painter, so you really feel like you're sitting there. The mother is dressed in mourning attire. She's still mourning her husband's passing. And there's such a sense with these empty chairs and this light filtering, this milky light filtering through the lace curtains. Nobody's interacting. Look very carefully at the rendering of the brother René as he cuts into this slice of meat so intently. He's completely absent socially and communally from what's going on. A very intense mourning picture. And then this marvelous painting of Caillebotte's brother Martial, who was a composer and a piano player. This is from 1876. But the longer you look at it, the more you realize how strangely placed that piano is. And the space takes on an almost sort of disturbing, menacing sensation, one that critics, when he exhibited this painting, picked right up on. They wrote about how that piano feels like it's about to fall out of the space into your lap and crush you. And so there's a way in which the artist uses space and texture to express a sense of sort of closing in and isolation. These are expressive pictures. His mother dies in October of 1878, and within months, the two remaining members of the family, the stepbrother is sort of out of the picture, but Martial and Gustave sell the family house on the Rue de Miromesnil and the Yare estate. They just get rid of them. And they move into a brand new apartment off the Boulevard Haussmann. And here is a picture of one of the rooms in that new apartment of this. It's a bachelor pad of brothers, and you see that Caillebotte has set himself up in the living room. There's that couch that's possibly his buddy, Richard Gallo, who features in several of the paintings. You see on the back wall, can anybody recognize what painting that is hanging over the couch? It's one of Auguste Renoir's great, great paintings. The Ball at the Moulin de la Galette, one of his most spectacular paintings of entertainment, middle-class entertainment in the new city. So he's signaling himself as a collector, as a painter. He's taken over the living room. It's not a family home. It's a place where Martial can compose music and he can paint and they can just have their friends over. And I love this plant here, this sort of sad, it's kind of like a man plant, the kind of plant you would see in a frat house or a bachelor home, just sort of basically surviving in the back. This cool social detachment persists in the paintings that follow. So you see on the left, it's a marvelous picture of Caillebotte's friends, his brother, around a table playing a game called Bézigue, which is a man-on-man card game, very intense, and they're all pulled up around. They're together, but they're together in that very macho way of being together and playing a game, but not, connecting interpersonally directly. And then I think much more poignantly, this very strange painting of a woman reading in a chair. She's reading a newspaper, and then her partner is laying on this couch, but he looks like a little doll way back there, and he's reading a novel stretched out on the couch. And I think what Caillebotte's trying to do is, through perspective and scale, is make you sense the distance between these two who live together but who are completely absorbed in their own worlds. And just to dramatize the difference in images of sociability, these two could not be more different. There is Auguste Renoir's Luncheon of the Boating Party, which hangs at the Phillips Collection. So I get to spend lots of time in Washington, D.C. with this wonderful picture from 1882, and the game of Bezique, painted for the exhibition in 1882. So in the Impressionist exhibition of 1882, these pictures hung in the same room. They're the same scale. They're both about friends having a good time, but look at the difference. Renoir's friends, boys and girls, and they're flirting and talking and drinking, and this is his mistress, kissing her dog on the lips, and people in the background, out in the sunshine, conviviality, flirtation, versus something that's just much cooler. That couch, it's so interesting how this couch keeps reappearing. You see Paul Hugo passed out on the couch in the background there, and there's that couch, and here it is in the bachelor pad with a naked girl stretched out on it. This is Caillebotte's only known female nude painting. It is a large picture. It's an important painting for him. Now, the function of the reclining female nude in the history of art is to inspire desire in the viewer. And the kind of desire that brings one into intimate physical communion with another. The female nude is an invitation to sensual pleasure. But I would argue that that's not what Caillebotte is giving you here. I've even used the description of that it is an anti-erotic painting, and particularly. George has spent quite a bit of time with this wonderful Gervais painting of Rolla. This is what the female nude is supposed to do. She's all about seduction and accessibility and invitation and supple flesh and sexy clothes versus those banged up boots that sit at the foot of that dirty couch and those not very erotic undergarments that are not nicely folded over the pillow. And here's Richard Gallo. This is a fellow who appears in many of the pictures in our exhibition and many of the paintings in Caillebotte's who's sitting on that same couch, arguably. But here there's it's been draped over with some garment. And Richard Gallo, he was we know a little bit about him. He was an editor, a journalist, and then he became the editor for Le Constitutionnel, which was one of the leading papers in Paris. He was a bachelor. We know that he didn't marry. We've been trying to find out more about him, but again, unluckily, his family at some point, another generation later, moves to Egypt, and they lose track of the family archives. And so I'm not sure we'll ever know more about him. But it seems to have been possibly, if you're using the paintings as evidence, that this is a sustained friendship, a close friendship. He's a more or less constant presence, but when you look at this painting, you see his body language is so closed, and he won't look at you. So many of the figures in the pictures won't directly connect with you. And then what can you tell about, here are two other pictures in the exhibition of Richard Gallo. This is Richard Gallo. This one, somewhat more open to the viewer / painter, but still quite reserved. And there he is out on the Seine in Petit Genevier, enjoying himself with his dog, walking along quite a bit later. Is there a way from the wonderful, and I have to say that one of my favorite chapters in the exhibition is the group of still life paintings. Is there a way that we can learn anything about Caillebotte's life from these pictures? Food still lifes, like female nude paintings, are also traditionally in art history an invitation to sensual reverie, of texture and color, a fantasy of taste, of plenty, of luxurious satiation. And I'm showing you here, this is the wonderful Museum of Fine Arts Boston still life of fruits on a market stand. And here you have some things that have been bought and brought back to the kitchen and laid out on a marble slab for preparation. And then finally, these wonderful paintings of, specifically, distinctly Parisian confections All of those baked goods, the eclairs and the gâteau Saint-Honoré, and there is a tarte aux framboises there, and then the marvelous, rather absurd lobster dish, which is called langouste à la parisienne, where you take all the lobster meat out and you do all these wild creative things to it and then stick it back in and decorate with artichoke halves and little olive eyes. These have the sensibility, all of these food still lifes, of the commercial store display, the deli case at a high-end market, the catered. This is depersonalized food. This is Caillebotte, the rich bachelor, picking these things up in his 9th arrondissement neighborhood, and the whole concept of homemade, or the communion of an individual, the personal touch with food, in which you fill meals with love, is here sort of stripped away. Several of the still lives double as sorts of meditations on death. This is a marvelous painting of chickens and plucked chickens and pheasants and hares. Kirk Varnadoe, the curator I referenced, described this painting in a very poetic way. He refers to the rather macabre rhythm of this butcher's display as, quote, chillingly mechanical, the bloodless assembly line review of fur, feathers, and plucked raw skin fixed on the horizontal bands of cold marble and metal. It's a haunting painting, a brilliant painting, beautifully done. I love that black backdrop against which Caillebotte is able to really show off his ability with textures. But when you look at the cropping, it's so astonishing, these heads lopped off. Here the head has fallen off the ledge and comes down. It really is an extraordinary, did Gustave Caillebotte have mortality issues? Is the question. And I would say, he lost both parents and his brother over the course of 4 years. He wrote his first will at the age of 28. He would, in fact, die young. There are more paintings of dead animals. The meat pictures, which are very strange and rather kinky. This side of beef, a splayed calf strung up like a victim of torture and then dolled up like a tart with a wreath of flowers. And that odd rose stuck, adorning the center like a corsage. And then the Chicago still life, truly one of the most astonishing paintings of the 19th century. Calf's head and ox tongue. Clearly, Caillebotte was attracted to the strange allure of this horrific scene, the coloristic vividness, the clammy texture of dead flesh, so far from the classical composure of traditional kitchen still lifes. And one thinks of 18th century examples, for instance, by Chardin. He had a very famous painting called The Meat Day Meal, which hung at the Louvre. But that's not where Caillebotte's going with this. Here he features the calf's head, the way that he paints the calf's head so sensitively, even delicately rendered in tones of gray and white, which makes the piercing by that cold steel hook all the more horrific. And he's just fascinated by the beef tongue, which attaches to its muscular base, laboriously extracted from the beef's jaws. It is sumptuously painted and immediately present, but you cannot deny the degree of blood and violence implied by the uprooted tongue and the severed head, even if it has been civilized by the industrial methods of the butchery business. So let's switch gears and get out to the countryside, kind of relief with which we get out of Paris and the strict boulevards and the claustrophobic interiors and those meat pictures into the riverscapes of the gorgeous suburban countryside, lush and sunny and relaxed. Caillebotte loved being out there, and he loved boating. He loved getting on the water and gliding along, propelled by the rhythmic motion of paddles, or even better, a breeze in the sail. He painted dozens of boating pictures in which you can feel his total engagement in this pastime. And so here you have two from, this is the River Yare, and these guys, it's basically kayaking is what they're doing, which Caillebotte loved to do himself. And then another one of my favorite images, this is called The Boating Party. This is a fellow who's just gotten off the train from Paris, and he's gone and rented a rowboat. He's still dressed very dandily in a top hat and a vest and purple pants and that wonderful striped shirt. Here the artist is celebrating this extraordinarily handsome, dapper fellow out in the sun in a rowboat, and there is a sense, I think, spatially in this painting, as you stand in front of it, of intimacy, of possibly even romance. I mean, it's a wonderfully sort of sexy painting even, physical proximity, although the gaze is still averted. So all three of these paintings are from Hyères, as I mentioned. The happy younger days out of the city, freedom and pleasure. But this is the state that they sold in 1878 after the passing of the mother. So he Gustave and his brother Martial buy another country retreat in 1881 at Petit Genevier, which is on the Seine River, just down from the Paris Sailing Club. And George and I ultimately were successful in getting this fantastic, really just classic Impressionist painting. It's the Seine, it's the bridge at Argenteuil, beautiful picture from 1883. One of his most successful, I would argue, river paintings. Difficult loan. It belonged to a woman who had it on long-term loan in London, and then she died, and it went onto the market, and then it was promised by the dealer, but he sold. I mean, it was really a hassle, but I'm so glad that we were able to bring it, because it does show his ability to paint really successfully these river pictures. He paints so many of them, and I think George and I agreed that so many of them are not terribly interesting. And there's a way in which he, across the 1880s, does sort of lose his grip. I talked about his serial family loss, but another thing happens in the early 1880s, another loss for Gustave Caillebotte, which was incredibly painful, which was the dissolution of the Impressionist movement. For him, it was everything, this movement. It was so much more than just getting together and finding a place to show and hopefully sell paintings, as it was for most of his colleagues. For him, it was really a crusade in which he was deeply invested. They would get together and talk about literally changing the course of the great French tradition of painting, which had been in place for 200 years and was felt to be foundering, and these guys were coming in to save it from a staleness and an obsolescence and a kind of triviality. He collected their works, he rented the space, he organized the group, he badgers them into staying with it, trying to keep them together, supporting them financially and morally and emotionally. And so these letters that I referred to that are published, you can just feel his efforts and his sort of egolessness, particularly when it comes to Monet, just trying to get Monet to stay with it. By 1880, rifts had begun to deepen within the group, centering mostly on the cantankerous figure of Edgar Degas, who differed in his vision of the group and its future from the vision that Caillebotte had. Monet and Renoir betray the group by abstaining from their exhibition in 1880 and showing instead with the official salon. I mean, this was just, heartbreaking. Caillebotte declined to show himself at the 1881 exhibition. For the first time since he had joined the Impressionist movement and the group, he abstains. And that is the same year that he and his brother Martial buy their own place out in the suburbs in Petit Genevier along the Seine. It's hard not to see a connection between his sort of moving away from the movement and his moving out into the suburbs. And he becomes very involved in sailing. And in December of that year becomes the chairman of the sailing club's regattas. He does show with the Impressionists again in 1882, but it's the last time that he will show with them. His hero, Edward Manet, is sick and would die the following year. Furthermore, the dealer Durand-Ruel circles back to a more engaged role in the movement. And as I mentioned earlier, in 1883, he mounts a series of monographic exhibitions devoted to some of the Impressionists whose work he has in stock. He had been collecting their work really from the late 1860s and through the 70s. And he gets it out in 1883, and through these monographic exhibitions begins to engineer of the movement something more commercially viable. This cannot have been interesting to Caillebotte, and was perhaps even disinteresting, detracting from the heroic nobility of the enterprise as he had conceived it. So he drifts away, eventually giving up his apartment in Paris and living in the suburbs full time. And his paintings generally lose the intensity of his earlier work. You will see in the show that we have favored his earlier career. And as you get into the later 1880s and early 1890s, there are fewer and fewer representations that we have included. One later picture stands apart from this disengagement. Man at the Bath from 1884, dated 1884. It is a large-scale painting, totally unprecedented and without parallel at the time. It is a brilliant painting, aggressive and bold. Although he had stopped showing with the Impressionists by this moment, he does send this picture several years later to an exhibition that Duras-Ruel is having in Paris in 1888. And Caillebotte sends this painting as #1 in his list, his marquee picture. It had already been framed, suggesting that it was hanging, probably in Caillebotte's home. Duras-Ruel apparently does not hang it. It doesn't appear in the exhibition catalog. That same year, Caillebotte sends it again, #1 among his entries, this time to Brussels, to the avant-garde exhibition group known as Les 20, or the 20. This was the major venue for cutting-edge European painting at the time. There's only one critical reference to the painting being in the exhibition, and that is to it hanging in the back room, and that it did not hang for the whole run of the exhibition. It is an exuberant account of masculine physical vitality. And as I mentioned, there are few, if any, images of men like this at their toilette, as it were, that is, washing or drying in a private indoor setting. The motif was common by the early 19th century in representations of women. Among Caillebotte's circle, both Renoir and Degas favored such themes. In fact, Caillebotte himself owned 2 such pastels by his friend Degas. This young man of athletic build has stepped from the tub and, facing the light, vigorously towels himself down. His clean skin glows with the scrubbing. His towel-dried hair fans out like fur from his neck as he flexes his legs and buttocks against the vigor of his motions. Caillebotte denies the viewer the frontal view of the bather as he finishes his task. The almost life-size scale of the painting seals its radical provocation. Who paints this kind of picture? Unconventional, radical, this artist free of bourgeois trappings and norms, unrestrained by convention, by parental or spousal mores, by the protocols of family and society. This kind of unique vision, the idiosyncratic, unfettered eye, was fast becoming a core value of modernism, a phenomenon that would accelerate into and across the 20th century. As we know from 20th century art history, the most poignant and lasting artistic statements often come from makers who seem not comfortably settled into their own time, who are somewhat out of step, knocked out of the norm by emotional duress or unsanctioned predilections or hypersensitivity or class differences. This is the singular, quite powerful vision of Gustave Caillebotte. Thank you.